My name is Vishal Chinchankar. I am the Chief Digital Officer at Madison and I run a media agency. So before we move on to our topic, which is data-driven mindsets, let me just do a quick introduction of the lovely panel that we have today. We've got Sujata. Sujata has over couple of decades of experience in sales and marketing with companies like PNG, Coke, Nokia, Google, and now she heads marketing for India and South Asia at Visa. We've got Pankaj Gupta, Senior Executive Vice President Sales and CMO HDFC Life. So we've got a couple of guys coming in from PFSI as an industry with wide experience from other industries as well. We also have Sagar Bokeh, Head of Marketing Food Businesses of Tata Consumer Products. Sagar is a proud guy to sell Desh Ka Namak, Tata Namak, and he also is responsible for the business of Tata Sampann Masales. So he's one of the great guys that we've managed to get on board today. We from the publishing side, we've got Tarika Soni. Tarika heads commercial strategy and ad monetization for Snapchat India, and she's been over a year. She's previously worked with Twitter for about 5 years and managed video shoots at Mopub with RTB and programmatic space. So we've got one person who's really into this data marketing stuff for more than about 7 8 years. So that's going to be a lovely piece to hear from them. And Sweta leads marketing at APAC level for Taboola. Taboola is the world's largest publishing and the native platform. So welcome on board, Tarika, Sweta. You guys, it's going to be wonderful to listen to you guys from the publishing perspective. And last but not least, we've got Archana Sinha. She's a senior marketing director at Salesforce, one of the technology partners, and she brings in a couple of decades of B2B marketing. In the past, she's worked with leadership roles like Oracle India, IBM, and Microsoft. So that's going to be a massively fantastic view coming in from various different industry perspectives. And before I move on, I like to wish Archana a very, very happy birthday. So happy birthday to you, Archana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have the best marketing minds coming out of BFSI, FMCG, publishing, and technology company. I think that's a wonderful array to get into this, right? Let's moving on before to our sessions. I'd like to just talk about what is happening in this industry. Over the last decade, we've witnessed a seismic shift of how marketing has outpaced. Conversations have been changing from GRPs, SOVs to programmatic and audience cohorts. There's a significant amount of marketing budgets which are shifting from traditional media to data-driven marketing today, right? And digital has seen implementation of machine learning, and Google and Facebook are one of the finest examples of how they really churn out data and they learn out of it. While India remains to be a duopoly market with walled gardens, take maybe a search or social for an example, most of the tractions get most data, and then the machine learning algorithm generates real great insight about the users, right? So that's what the whole marketing is more headed towards. It's also a drip to a business to a large industries. And when I talk about a drip to the businesses, it's all about the funnel marketing. There's top of the funnel, which is more awareness and recruitment of new users, and then there's a bottom of the funnel where your hard one-on-one, sharp, targeted marketing really comes to the play and optimizes to create more generate convergence. So this is marketers to upskill, upgrade their sales and their teams, yeah, to live up to this dynamic change. All right, so that's what's really happening in this context. And so let's find out from this eminent panel whether data-driven marketing mindsets can really help them make informed decisions quickly, deliver higher marketing outputs, understanding consumer journeys and audience trends, and many more such questions, right? So let's move on to our first question. And so I'd like to just open up this question more from the publishing side and then later move on to tech and the marketing side of what does it really take for companies to create strong data driven cultures, right? So from a team's point of view, how do you really, that they're going to be, I'm going to break this question more into the part. One is the culture of how do you really build the culture inside your company. How do you really upskill your managers? How do you really bring them to speed uh, with the capabilities and the data knowledge led stuff? And on the other hand, another challenge remains is how do you really even get your management to invest more into these data products, right? I can imagine the publishing side and the technology guys who really live breathe out of data in and out must not be extremely difficult, but it will be very exciting to hear a point of view from marketing side of the businesses. So I let this question open to you guys. Start with Sweta. Do you want to just step up?
Thank you, Vishal. So from Taboola's angle, Taboola being a publisher and a native advertising platform, data is really our bread and butter. And I think really to create a data-driven culture, it starts from the top. So we all like to joke at Taboola that our president has a huge poster in his office. It's custom made and it says, "In God we trust, but for everyone else, please bring data." So that's pretty much how Taboola's culture is. So
Nice.
internally, we really measure everything. No actions get approved without data to back it up, usually 3 pieces from 3 different sources, internal and external. And everything is measured. So from the basics of business like ROI, business metrics, even our HR function is measured. So we have an MIT graduate who leads our people analytics team based in New York. So internally, it's just drilled into our DNA. Externally, since we're an ad platform, data is definitely live and die for us. That's why we have brands that always spend with us, and that's the ROI. The hard ROI is what drives retention out there. And it's just a part of the culture driven down from the top. It's role modeled. A lot of our meetings start with something provocative, like a data nugget. For example, we recently had a F1 pit stop that was world breaking. It was under 2 seconds. So the question to all the Taboolars was, how many of Taboola videos do you think was seen in those 1.8 seconds? And we had to guess. So it's just something that's driven from the top and something in our DNA.
I can agree with that. I think from our point of view on Snapchat, again, we are a data heavy advertising platform like any other tech giants that exist out there. So it's clearly similar to Smita's story. It's quite drilled in our DNA. And I want to take it a step forward. The way we look at data is data is king. The rest of it is all just an opinion. That's the way we use the language internally. An opinion is an opinion. Everyone has a right for it, but data is scientific, right? So the way we use it, first, I want to start first with advertising and how we use that. And I know back in the day when marketing with FMCG or any other vertical for that matter existed, it was a lot to do with gut checks. You knew your audience better than anyone else did, right? That was the notion that everyone on the marketing side knew, like, you know your audience the best. That's the assumption. Now, the interesting thing is when you go into an advertising world, which is so skewed towards data driving, that a lot of the times a lot of my exercises are myth busting exercises where I talk to gamers or I talk to FMCG partners and I say, I know you're specifically targeting a 35 plus for a reason, but open your horizon a little more and maybe test a 25-year-old, maybe test over a 35-year-old. So I'll try and expand their horizon, again, with the nugget of proving post-campaign, when they get that data, that actually 24 to 35 may outperform your audience that you think is your audience, right? So I think the interesting thing we've learned, and I've learned this a lot with my past experience as well. I've been in the app ecosystem for a long time now, and I've realized that especially when gaming became the most sophisticated app vertical, right? And you would think, well, somebody like me, I'm fond of gaming, I'm a casual gamer, but I'm also fond of cooking and baking. Now, if I spoke to a gamer and said, target interests based on cooking for a 30-plus-year-old woman, they would laugh at me and say, no, that's not my audience at all. That's absolutely not my audience. Why would I go after cooking? They're not like interested in puzzle games, or I would only target games, right? Now that they can actually see, once they've enabled a wider audience to reach out to, that it actually drives ROI. I think that horizon has changed over time, where it's less gut driven and more data driven. So the appetite to test has increased, which is interesting. So you could be a gamer and you could be fond of cooking, and that's fine. I think the advertisers have learned to understand that what they understand about their audience is one thing, but data should speak louder. So that's one way in the advertising stack, right? Now, not just that, we are collecting data, like specifically for Snapchat in my case. We don't have followers, or you follow me and I follow you, and I like food, or I'm like following a Mexican handle because I like Mexican food. That's not how we're collecting data, right? Like, you telling me is not authentic enough for us. So what we are doing on Snapchat is actually building cohorts of data set based on the snaps you're sending to your friends. So we are saying, you're actually taking a picture of the Mexican food that you're eating outside a Mexican restaurant. I believe you're actually a Mexican fan. So I think that's the way we are pulling data based on actuality, because pictures don't lie, which is the data context that we're pulling from. So that's one angle to think of. Is it's not about what you're telling me, it's actually what I'm pulling and understanding from your behavior. So it's a lot more organic and authentic. So that's one way of thinking about marketing. And then in terms of the culture, which is the last piece I want to touch on, a data-driven mindset, when we do rigorous hiring, right? Like, I'm completely aligned with what Smita had said, top down, but even from a bottoms up standpoint, when I'm hiring teams right now, there is a point in their final stages of their interview where we'll give them a case study of trying to solve a problem for a brand. And it is essentially just data. That's all they're doing, is crunching numbers and telling me if they increase the CPM by this much and increase their daily budget by X, what is the click-through ratio that they would be able to see? What is the in-store ratio they would be able to see, and for how long? And those are really technical, data-driven questions, right? Like, I don't necessarily believe you have to come from a stat or a math background, but you need to understand that when you're coming into a dynamic, data-driven environment, so that you're not left behind, but you can actually cope with that dynamic nature of the business that we're living in.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Tarika. I'd love to hear from Pankaj as well as uh, Sujata. Your side, because you guys, both of you all come from hardcore BFSI. You all eat, breathe numbers. It's all about sales and more into uh, the visa stuff or the insurance area that you guys get into. How important is it for your marketing? And I'm assuming, Sujata, for you, it would have been a dramatic change. I mean, you've been into P&G and Coke, and you spoke this language of GRPs, right? And from there now into a visa where you really using data. So how's been your journey over there?
Thanks, Vishal. So firstly, I would say as marketers, we have to balance, the whole in gut feel and how we use insights along with what we use with data driven. And more I see, especially now in the BFSI, it's really critical to have a data driven approach because what we've seen with more and more campaigns is when we have data driven personalization, the returns on investment in marketing are far, far higher. So that is something that's, we've seen campaign over campaign. So therefore, it is critical to have that. However, I would always say that it's very important to balance that, with understanding what your consumer insights are. Because, if you just go with data, and I understand where Sweeta and Tarika are coming from, but as marketers, when you think about customers and when you think about consumers, you have to balance both. Having said that, like we said, in marketing earlier, we used to do a lot more just generic, above the line, a lot of spray and pray, as I would like to say. And now we're seeing the merits of doing data driven. So how does the organization equip itself? And in Visa, so we actually have a really great internal learning and upskilling portal It's called Visa University. And you'll be interested to know we actually have data-driven marketing as from grade 1 to 10. So people can actually upskill themselves. So whether you come in as a fresh management trainee or you come in at a senior level, you go and assess what level you're at, and you're able to upskill yourselves. Of course, the external courses and stuff that people take. We read a lot of reports that come out, but I think the two big things that really contribute to developing a data-driven mindset for marketing is, number one, like I said, doing a combination of insights and understanding a consumer and doing data-driven marketing and using that. And the truth test is actually to see what your return on investments on your marketing spend are. So that's what we do. And we see that as and more, we do more and more data-driven personalization to our campaigns, we're getting higher MROIs.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Vishal, I wanted to get in here, and I represent the life insurance industry. And
Right.
if you look at the structure of the life insurance industry, we are in the business of getting customers for the very long term. And we are in the business of taking a small amount of premium and paying huge amount of claims at a certain point of time. The way the industry works in life insurance is that data permeates all aspects of our operations. One of the most important persons in the life insurance company is our actuary and the actuarial team. And actuaries in a way are the real experts in using, manipulating, and manipulating in a positive way, using and implementing various action items based upon a very deep, solid understanding of the data. So when I say data permeates all aspects of our company's operations, it starts from even before a customer is acquired into our system, which is the customer segment that we should go after. Whatever customer segment we go after, in what geography do we go after that customer? What is the message we take to that customer so that the message is registered? If we are going for a certain customer, what is the sales channel to use? If we are approaching a customer with a different offer versus rather A versus a B offer, which offer makes sense to which customer? So the take-up rate might be different for different offers. If I'm processing that customer through my system, whether I do it digitally or physically or through a phone-based approach, which approach works better with which customer? Once the customer is within my setup, in terms of engagement with a customer, what is the customer looking for as a message from me as part of the life cycle that I have with the customer? Is it a message about something that is relevant to his child because he's worried about his child's education and what he can do through our solutions for his child? Or is he rather thinking about his retirement planning? Or is he worried about his health situation and health cost escalation? All of these elements become very important. In our industry, the customer comes for the real long term. So something called persistency is very, very critical. And persistency again is determined with a lot of scientific data usage, including aspects like which product has a higher persistency, which cohorts have a higher persistency, which geographies have got impacted in one way or the other, which channel partners are acquiring a certain type of a customer for us, and so on and so forth. So not just marketing. When I talk about data in life insurance context, it permeates all aspects of our operations. If I have to come to marketing side in particular, so from a marketing perspective alone, there are so many different things where data becomes a very critical aspect of our decision-making process. One of the projects that my team led recently was deciding the regional language strategy for the company. Now, when we decide the regional language strategy for the company, what is right in Tamil Nadu may not be right in Karnataka. What is right in Chennai may not be right in Salem. And what is right in Bengal may not be the right solution in Orissa. So how do we decide each one of those? Is there a trend that we can observe because of the ticket sizes? Is there a trend we can observe because of the product stream? Is there a trend based upon whether the customer signed his initial application in a regional language versus the English language? Is there a difference when we approach the customer with a written communication versus a phone communication, or versus, let us say, a formal document like a policy document versus a promotional communication, which I'm sending to him on email? So when I'm talking about data permeating all aspects of the life insurance company's operations, it is a very, very exciting journey for us. And the way I have seen it evolve is somebody mentioned that culture and beginning from the top is very, very important. And I fully agree with that. I think Sweta mentioned that it has to begin from the top, because the type of sophistication that we need in our industry, in our context about data is a very high level sophistication. And that means that we need the right quality, right talent in our system, which essentially is not very easy to get. We need to have the technological backbone to manipulate, again, in a positive way, that much of data. And if we are able to create that backbone, that means investments. If you want to operate at a certain level, that again means having that ability to manage that much of data flowing through our organizations. Can we manage the peak data that is flowing through our organization, which may be 100,000 transactions in a second or in a couple of seconds? So all of those things mean that it begins from the top, along with the culture, the hiring process, the talent process, as well as the investment approval that are needed at a very, very top level.
So hang in there, Pankaj, and I'm so glad that you touched upon all the aspects of my question that I was trying to ask. Now I want you to wear a marketing hat and tell me that for you and your business, generating leads on a regular basis is still going to be more performance led and drip somewhere for you, right? So what portion of your budgets do you allocate more towards data driven marketing versus your generic traditional way of gut feel way of advertising?
I would say almost 80 to 90% of our decision making is borne by some data that is underlying our decision making process. There is a subjectivity in certain parts of the decision making. For example, whether you go with A creative versus B creative is a function of not just which creative will work better, but which creative may have, in today's social media's active context, a level of risk which we have to be accepting of if you want to go ahead with a certain type of a creative. And that part of subjectivity, when it comes to taking a certain risk, for example, with a creative strategy, that is the gut part or the decision making part. But if I have to decide if I have a product A to sell, which creative I go with, I know with a fair degree of accuracy through my data analysis which creative will work better. If I have to design my media plan, I know where my customer is, what are the demographics I'm going after, which is the media being consumed more. Is it print? Is it TV? Is it digital? Is it Hotstar versus YouTube? All of data is available with me. So I would say if I have to quantify 80 to 90% of my decision making in marketing today is data-based, but yes, there is a 10 to 20% element of subjectivity, which primarily comes to either creative differences or a risk type of an approach, what approach we take to risk with a certain creative or a certain concept or a certain communication.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in on Pankaj's point actually very quickly. On the creative example, I think that's where publishers like me and Taboola would probably play a role, where we have dedicated data science teams in-house that are built from ground up, where to encourage a more efficient gut for Pankaj's business, for example, is where we will actually run blinded case studies internally, which are first party driven, and externally through third parties, so that when the likes of insurance companies or any marketer for that matter wants to know A versus B as an A/B test, either we give them our internal first party data, which are blinded. A lot of the times that's more for our knowledge than asked by the advertiser. But if and when asked by the advertiser, it is always driven by the third party for like the likes of Kantar or Millie Brown or whoever, Nielsen, where they'll actually do these brand lift studies where it's very hard, right? Like even for insurance, when you're splitting between TV and digital, I understand not just digital, but even mobile to that matter is very intimate, because my device is just my device. My husband and my kids, and none of them are using it, right? Like, so it's very intimate data. So that's one. But what is the guarantee that the ad that converted on Snapchat wasn't actually an offshoot of TV? And that's where these brand lift studies really act as that primer as to whether it's worth investing in this digital platform, or are you just leaking your dollars, right? So I think that's where we play a role in giving that.
Thanks, Tarika. Thanks for touching on the measurability attribution, but we're going to do a deep dive on that and we'll come to you a bit later. But before I come to you, I'd love Sagar to step in. And Sagar, you run a fantastic show of, one of the most popular brand called as Tata Salt. It's more modern trade, it's more general trade. You reach out to tier two, tier threes. You have premium brands in that. You have the masalas, and you come from a very hardcore typical FMCG where GRPs also drip your business, but you've been taking some great moves. You've invested into a lot of data lakes. You've invested into your own e-commerce. There's a lot of content that's getting created, and there's a lot of data that's also getting generated. So what's your vision? And I want you to touch upon how have you been successfully managed to really build that culture within your system, keeping in mind that you come from, an FMCG fast-moving environment.
Yeah. So, Vishal, I will answer the second part of your question first. I think the first thing, everything starts really with the culture. So other than having commitment from top, which I think everyone has spoken about, there are two things which we really need to, which I think in a company like ours and largely would apply to most of the FMCG companies that need to be done. The first thing is, I think you have to commit. You have to show there are going to be benefits on the table. Like say, for example, if you are investing in data management platform, it's not only about the money, it's also about the time that you are investing, right? If you show that you are going to save 15% of your money, you are going to make your funnel much sharper. You're almost turning a funnel to a cylinder, right? I think that's when people will start buying in what you believe. That's the first thing. I think you have to be committed. You have to show that it works. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that is important is really that if you look at the marketers, I think FMCG is really where the marketing originally started, right? And that's an advantage as well as that's a disadvantage, because most of the people also have been trained in television in terms of we say there are three things in FMCG. First thing, you have a great product, you create a great communication, and you put in that commercial on the best possible television channels and get into the outlets, and either you succeed or you don't, right? I think that's changing, and hence investing in educating your team, because there are so much of changes happening here. I think that's a very important, and that education also has to happen both upwards and downwards. I think these are the two things that if you really do, that really would help us to become. Looking at it's not very obvious that someone selling a salt and a spice to be really investing so much in data. I would say that it really should start from what you really would want to do. So if you look at salt per se, I think data has to be subset of your business strategy. So if you're looking at salt, so Tata Salt, obviously there are 75 crore Indians, so every single person in this country almost uses. Every 2 out of 3 people in this country uses Tata Salt. Maybe the role of data is not as strong there, but if you're looking at Tata Salt Light, which is a low sodium salt, which is targeted people who can develop lifestyle disease, I think that's a very sharp audience that you're talking about. I think there is a role for data, and that's where we really invest significant amount of money there. Other thing that we are also realizing is that brands, the way they are getting popular is changing. Pre-digital and post-digital, it was a one-way traffic. Essentially, marketer was disseminating a message and consumer had an option to accept or reject it. Consumer never had an option to respond what he or she felt about it, right? I think with digital that is fundamentally a change. So one significant advantage that most of the marketers will have post-digital is to build a community of fans. So if you look at the whole Nutri-Corner strategy, I think I would say we are possibly one of the pioneers to really create a content to commerce platform there. We are on 5 to 6 lakhs visitors coming every single month. Is to really create a club of fans, and that can only happen if you have data. So you know a customer who has been coming regularly, what he or she is interested in, what kind of content you should give, how you should create opportunities for that consumer to buy. And that really comes from our belief that if tomorrow we are able to create 100,000 fans of Tata Sampann as a brand, our ability to create advocacy and sale is going to be significantly higher. So I would say it finally boils down to what you really would want to do, and I think it has to be strategy first, and execution would really follow.
Well said, Sagar. Well said. Absolutely appreciate that point of view. I want to ask you one specific, very, very specific question. You've done
Sure.
serious levels of investments when it comes to sharp targeting, and you, in fact, invested more even in the space of your own DMP, right? How difficult or how easy does it become to, convince your management or convince your managers to really come up to the speed of understanding the importance and the value of your investments?
Well, I think every new thing always passes through this phase, right? I mean, ignorance, ridicule, and finally acceptance, right? I think it's a process. If you really believe in it, it really pays off. I would say that it's been around 3-4 years we have been on this journey. Where we currently are, possibly we are significantly ahead of most of the peers in the industry, I would say. Uh, I would say upwards and downwards everywhere. I think people appreciate the value that you are adding. And finally, I think the numbers and the results speak. I think that's one, I wouldn't say mantra, but one experience that I would like to share with anyone who is in conventional industry, where it is believed that digital doesn't really have data, doesn't have a role to play. I think start with small steps, demonstrate, and that's when the magic starts.
Fantastic. Well said. Now I'm going to move to Archana. Archana, you come from a serious tech background. You've been into this B2B. You work with organizations like Microsoft, Oracle. You've been living that culture. You've been living with that culture, not just with your managers, but also your top management, right? But having said that, you still wear a marketing hat, right? And you still talk to various different organizations, or you still need to promote your product, which is still more data led. So how do you look at that piece of business where you look at it data to sell your own data products?
Sure, thanks, Vishal. I think I'll answer the question in two parts. I think the first, bit which is really important is that I think as a company, Salesforce believes completely in building a data-first culture themselves. So internally, we have a data-first culture. This is something that I've seen evolve over the years, working with various different companies, seeing this culture evolve. I think there are three things which are very important. One is building a data-first culture. Second, looking at marketing as performance-based. So I think there's a lot of arguments against and for why marketing should be performance-based. And the third aspect being, how do you actually build a data-driven team? I think the culture of an organization making that data heavy or data oriented is really about driving data driven decision making this the norm. So I think this creates a culture which encourages critical thinking and curiosity. And people at every level, whether you speak to the junior most, the senior most person in the organization, all of these people have conversations that start with data, and they actually develop their own data skills through practice and application. I think this is another thing that's really critical. So at Salesforce, we actually have a very, very strong onboarding model where people, when they join the company, they actually go through, and I'm talking about the marketing environment, go through very rigorous onboarding training, where they actually get to understand how we use our own solutions, and then how do you actually use these solutions to create campaigns which perform, and how do you actually think about measurement as your north star. I think that's really important, and that's something that happens through and through in Salesforce. Um, I think another thing which is foundational is that this actually requires a self-service model of data, where people can actually access the data they need, balance that with security and governance, and that's something that is built into our platform. And I already talked about the proficiency being done through creating training and development. Now, again, Salesforce leads with a lot of with a growth mindset. So learning and development are part of the culture again. We have what is called as Trailhead, which is something that we offer to customers as well, where that's actually self-paced e-learning, and we use that internally as well. So employees learn data skills by actually spending time, and they are encouraged by their managers to invest time in their own training and development. Um, I think other than this, when I talk about how Salesforce uses Salesforce for data-driven marketing, we actually use our own product called Sales Cloud, where we set up campaigns to track the success of each activity, analyze what is driving those activities. We use campaign history to enable the sales teams to understand what audiences are responding to. This this actually helps drive alignment between sales and marketing, which is really truly integral to marketing's ROI. The other thing that I want to point out is we use Marketing Cloud, which actually helps to use different data points in order to segment audiences across channels. We use Datorama, which actually integrates digital campaign activity and also takes in Marketing Cloud data to empower all campaign marketers to have insights, to have discussions around ROI, and to think about how they can actually personalize their messages through different channels. Of course, we use analytics because that's actually what helps us to measure and understand the results of the marketing campaigns, that we are driving, which we do through using campaign setup in the tools. I think another thing which is really important to point out is the Salesforce DMP, that's the data management platform, which actually houses first party data segments for cross channel targeting. So if we send audience segments to our CMS, our content management system, it serves personalized content. We also use the DMP segmenting for customer suppression and personalization, where we can actually target social lookalikes and also display messaging. We also have a dynamic email engine, which is again built on Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So I can go on, but the thing is that we actually use all of this internally, and in fact we also at times present this to customers where we talk about how Salesforce uses Salesforce. Another very important aspect of data is trust, and trust is the number one value for Salesforce. In fact, we have a site which is called trust.salesforce.com, where actually there is transparent data sharing, which is actually the Salesforce community's home for real-time information on system performance and security. So it's actually a part of the DNA of the company.
Fantastic, Archana. Thank you so much. So I think net we've sort of spoken about every industry's culture. How does the top management really look at it? We've looked at some conversations about gut feel versus decision making using quantifiable research and data. We did speak about stuff like the DMPs and dynamic creative optimization, personalization, communications, and messaging. You know, uh, there's one fantastic question that I've got from an audience, and I just couldn't stop myself to pick it up. But there's one great question which says that could you please suggest the importance? Sorry, I'm just. Sorry, yeah. So, what's the bridge between human learning and machine learning in decision making? And that probably would give a bit of a peek on gut feel versus really decision making stuff. I just want to keep this question open to all, whoever wants to pick this up, because this has come from Manas Mohan, and I thought it's a lovely question. So, a bridge between human learning versus machine
Yeah.
learning.
So,
Yeah.
Vishal, if you may, I
Yeah.
would
Love
like
you.
to give it a yeah. I think if you really think of it, human learning, I mean, what you say as gut feel is nothing but data. What you call as intuition is actually data in practice. What is intuition is essentially a pattern when you had similar stimuli in the past, the response, how you are giving is what the gut feel is, right? So essentially, it's the greatest example of how biotechnology and data science is married, and that's what gut feel is, right? So gut feel, I would say, so human learning and machine learning, till the time machines become
Sagar, have we lost you?
I,
I can pitch in if you
I
want,
can
Vishal.
also, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yes,
also wanted
Jata,
to,
why don't you go ahead till we get Sagar
yeah,
back? Yeah.
sure. So, I think that there is you need to have a balance of both. Absolutely. Like we said, we need to have gut feel, you need to have data. But over and above all, I think there's one thing which we're missing, which is content. whether you do the gut feel route or whether you're using data, I think content is the king, and you need to make sure you have that. Beyond then, you then need to look at what the sort of product is. And from a marketing standpoint, I'll talk about two things. So for example, you have, like Sagar talked about, products like salt, which is very, generic and, widespread. In Visa, I would say credit cards would be one of those, because, that's relevant for everybody, especially in today's day and age when we're seeing people are going more and more off cash and into more, contactless ways of paying. That's something that's relevant for everybody. There, I see a greater role of, gut feel, understanding what is the right content, what is the right insights to put across and come across with a mass campaign. You obviously have a, a TV leg, but there is a very strong role for digital to play in that. Then there are very, very targeted products such as, cross-border travel, which, like I said, it varies from person to person, and there is not one answer that fits all. So in something like this, you would have to have a very, very strong data-driven approach. I think I mentioned it to you earlier, but I think for the wider group, it's very relevant. Like you say, there is you, Vishal, who's traveling to, say, Dubai in 90 days versus an Archana who's traveling to Singapore in 6 days. There are very, very different needs that you both have, and I cannot give you a same messaging. So with DCO, and you touched about DCO, it actually helps us to actually target you, saying that your 60 to 90 days, you will actually need much more planning help, which is like, where should I stay? What's the best rates? What are the best tickets? While an Archana who would have reaching in 6 days would have probably already done that. What she would need is actually what are the deals for shopping, for dining. And that's where I feel the right programmatic, using DCO and using data-driven, you can actually target the right audience, your right consumer with the right message. And that is it. And of course, for overall products, whether it's FMCG or products like we said, credit cards, you use a much more mass, but you add in the data aspect to sort of segment between different target groups, different age groups, millennials versus elders. But there is a need for both, and like I said, content has to be the key in all.
I completely appreciate, and that's the right chord you've touched upon. I want to get back to Sagar. Sagar, are you back? Can I have your point of view on this? Do we have him? Have we lost him?
I think we've lost him again.
We've lost him.
Vishal,
Okay, Pankaj, I want you to step up.
Yeah, if I have to give my perspective on human learning and how it transitions to machine learning, it's a very, very important and burning question right now. The way I see it, there are two parts in which it can be dissected. One is which are those elements of your decision making, whether it is marketing decision making or even other decision making, which is at a high frequency and in a relatively stable environment. So for example, whether you approve a credit card transaction when it is swiped at a machine, or whether I approve a customer's underwriting when I am getting the risk to be signed off at my end, which is a normal situation, high frequency situation, and there has not been any systemic impact. For example, I might be doing a high frequency transaction through machine learning in a usual scenario, but after pandemic, because of COVID, do I suspend it for the time being and supplement with expert insights? So that is the way I see it. If it is a high frequency decision in a relatively stable context for most of the usual transactions, I'll go with machine learning. If it is a highly specialized decision, which is a low frequency decision, or say decision which is coming after a systemic shock, like let us say a COVID situation, or it could be any other situation in any industry. It could have been the 2008, 2009 global financial crisis also. So I would have to suspend my judgment. One example is, for example, how you use credit scores. Credit score in a way is an aggregation of a lot of knowledge, and I can use it to take my decisions. But after a systemic shock, is the same credit score still valid or not for my decision making through my algorithms? All that is still in the air. I would say that deep level of machine learning is still some time away.
Well said, Pankaj, well said. And I'm going to move to the publishing side and now the technology side. Sweta, Tarika, and Archana, you guys spoke a lot about, the culture of data, and you guys live, breathe, eat data. I want each one of you to step up and say what's the importance of human learning in your business, because end of the day, whatever machine gives you a learning, it's still built by humans, right? So Sweta, you run a great network of native advertising. You have great data coming in from news sites and consumers. what's your human learning coming into the play, and how does it really impact the machine learning?
Honestly, I completely agree with Sujatha and Pankaj, where they have to coexist. It's a happy coexistence of what Sujatha said before, which was gut feel is really just really strong knowledge of your consumer. And the best Taboola can do, yes, we have, NDTV, India Today, all these, and we have click data from half the world's internet users, but that's no substitute for what a brand manager can do. So the best we can do is guide the brand manager to use what they already know. So for example, let me pick on, let's see, Sajar and the food industry, salt, for example. We have a site called trends.taboola.com, which just compiles week by week data from per country, per category, and what creatives are getting clicked on. So if we were to go with that, his creatives would be featuring women this week. Let me look, a close-up of her face and eating indoors. So the creative would be targeted that way. But that's over so many brands, and the specific salt might not be like that at all. So it's no use really just to rely on the data. It's a guidepost, but it has to coexist.
Thank you. Very well said. Okay, Tarika, human learning versus machine learning. You have so much of machine learning. Tell me, what are humans doing?
So I will be honest. So in the programmatic space, right, I think I agree with Pankaj. We are a few years away from machine learning being democratized in the way that it will get there. Oh, Sagar's back, nice. So I think the interesting thing is it's coming, but I agree with Pankaj. We are quite a few decades away, if not more, where right now we are in a hybrid. We're leaning more and more on data. That's not to say that it would completely veto out. One thing I want to touch on, right, like which I was thinking about right now, and Sujatha was talking about content. Now, on our side, right, like on Snapchat, I don't know how many of you saw yesterday's tweet around the US president's not going to be curated on Snap. Now, how do we as a Snapchat, as a platform, take that? The reason we could take a stand there, and I'm being honest here, is as candid as I can be, is there's curated data. And what does curated data mean? Curated means that there is human interaction where we choose whether this is appropriate or inappropriate, right? So that's why we're not heavily leaning 100% on machine learning. If we were, there's nothing controversial on my platform that was tweeted. We're not Twitter, right? So the fact that we took that stand is because we have the right as a platform where we curate publisher content. It's not an open platform like a lot of platforms exist out there. You can't, if I want to create a homegrown video and publicize it, I can't. But if that was what was allowed, then I'm not human impacting and curating the data or promoting it based on what my audience wants to see. So I think this is where it's a really good example from yesterday, where the fact that we're curating data with human interaction, like I have a team that vets content, that looks at content on a daily basis, guides publishers on what will work and not work. That is all human interaction. That is not just based on behavior that we're seeing, right? Like, and this is another example that I'd given you earlier. A lot of the times we see in platforms, especially in social media, across all platforms, where when you're a microphone to the world, it's a lot about gloating. It's a lot about how many people are following me, how many friends do I have, how many likes do I have. Like that's become a part of our DNA in the way we consume content now, right? And it's interesting to see is I may not actually like fashion, but I'm kind of under pressure because all my friends like fashion, so now I have to like fashion. That's not really your private personal interest. So now if I'm targeting you based on fashion and you've never ever made a previous purchase, that's inaccurate data. So I don't know 100% if the machine is there yet, where human interaction is not valid. I think human interaction might be more valid in a lot of times in the instances that I've given you in the last few days, especially, than machine learning only.
Thank you, Tarika. Thank you. Archana, what's your point of view? You sell a lot of high-end technology products, you use a lot of data, right? But how do you see, there's a great amount of machine learning. You build a lot of cohorts, you do a lot of DCO, you do a lot of tool management stuff. But where's the experience and the human learning coming into the play for you as your industry?
I think, I'd like to just start quickly with talking about, the very interesting debate between trusting your gut and trusting data, which comes through machine learning. And how do you actually combine the two? I think in terms of, decision making, sometimes when we are facing information overload, or in a situation like the pandemic currently, often there is, because of the pressure, or to make the right decisions, we actually delay decision making. We put the choice off rather than deciding. I think
Yeah.
trusting your gut really allows leaders freedom to move forward. And while intuition can actually provide a hunch or a spark that starts you down a particular path, or reasoning, it's actually data that you verify, understand, and quantify. I think as the world is evolving, we're actually going through an intelligence revolution. Everything is smarter. Everything that we use is smarter. Everything is driven by artificial intelligence. We can communicate with our speakers, our watches, our cars. Infrastructure in the world talks to each other. And actually, machine learning is driving recommendations that are surprisingly predictive out of all this. And smart experiences are something that customers like you and me, we have come to expect this. Having said that, I think a very important point is that, with the world in crisis, such as, the situation is right now, the use of customer data for empathetic marketing has come to the forefront. And I bring this point up because I think it's really essential to have clear understanding of the customer's needs as they evolve. And AI actually helps marketers achieve personalization at scale by actually pulling out insights from data and taking action very quickly. In fact, I will cite reference to a sixth state of marketing report, which has just been released by Salesforce, where we've actually reached out to about 7,000 plus global, marketeers, including a large percentage from India. And 84% marketers report using AI, which is about 30% higher than it was in 2018. So as the amount of available data grows and the platforms that have to manage grow, um, I think it's really important to use human learning where you have data and insights and information, but actually making the decision really involves gut feel. And as a leader, you should use gut feel, because that's really, that is where your experience actually comes handy. So I think
Fantastic.
it's a mix of the two.
Fantastic. Well said, Archana. We are currently at 4:55, closer to 4:55. We have just about 5 minutes. Now I'm going to go around the table, and I'm just wanting each CMO to leave one advice for to this audience's wonderful audiences that we've got today. What is that one thing, as a data-driven mindset that you guys have? What is that one thing that you want to tell the audiences? Maybe a short sentence. You got 5 minutes, and we have six panelists. Come on, Archana, do you want to go first?
One, very hard to pick one. I think what is really important is, I think what I would say is engage customers at the right moment with the right message, through personalized marketing. By knowing what the customer wants or the consumer wants, you can actually exceed expectations by serving them what they want, and this actually comes through data driven mindset.
Fantastic. Sujata.
I'd like to say that, and as a really traditional marketer from over 20 years, is don't get overwhelmed with data and, have so many filters that you finally end up, with a small subset and you lose the larger picture of why we are marketers, which is to understand the consumer insight, develop the right content. So I think data is great, but we shouldn't get overwhelmed with it.
Fantastic. Pankaj.
My message is that having a data-driven mindset is a must today, and we all, if we have not already done it, align ourselves to that reality. However, as it has been said here, we must leave some room for the human intuition and judgment to play that final role. It is not going away anytime soon.
Sure. Sagar.
I would say always,
Sagar, do we
always.
have you?
Yeah, can you hear me? I think in between there was some issue.
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
Better.
So I would say look at where data fits in your overall strategy. I think data should start should basically essentially a subset of your strategy. Experiment. Sometimes experiment would surprise you if you have very cheap. I think that's what I would say.
That's a very nice one. Thank you, Sagar. Really appreciate. Can we have Swita?
So I think in terms of as marketers, we've been told that data is really the new oil and we got to get the infrastructure, start gathering it. But once we have it, we don't necessarily know what to do with it. And we get all this analysis paralysis. So the best thing to do, like as all my panelist peers have said before, is have a data hypothesis driven approach. So you know your customer more than anyone else. Start from there, then get the data. That's only if it will influence your decision or not. If it doesn't, it's useless to collect it.
Well said. Tarika.
So off of the same vein, I would say track everything, and then a lot. It's a common symptom. People collect too much data and don't know what to do with it. It needs to derive a decision. But I think not tracking is equally harmful, which is not even influencing your decision. So I think tracking is equally important. Track and then decide how you want to use it.
Thank you, lovely panelists. And I think that was a wonderful session. I'm just going to quickly sum it up in about a couple of minutes of what all that we've today covered for these audiences. We did speak about the culture. We did speak about the tools and the data lakes and the data stacks and the DMPs and the DCOs. During this course, I did keep getting some questions, and there was audience asking about what are the kind of tools that you suggest. That's quite a very narrow question, so I probably wouldn't want to take it. But you guys, there is a lot of stuff that we've spoken probably that will address to your questions. Uh, and wonderfully, what was really appreciated by most of you all is the human versus the machine. I think that was still remains. And while we may want to bend toward machine today, we still need to be quite balanced between these two, because it is the gut which also helps us really create that business. So I think it was really wonderful. I really thank you. I think I'm sure out of this session today, we've heard a lot of data-driven marketing stuff of how can it really help you take informed decisions. How can it understand the consumer journey, really create audiences, and how do you really look at LTV, lifetime value for the customers. We did touch upon the fact that it delivers much high ROI. So just summing that up, I'd like to personally thank everyone for this session. I think you guys were wonderful. The audience was wonderful, though we couldn't see them, but I think I'm assuming that this audience has really been giving us a good year. So on that note, I really wish you good luck and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vishal. It was great
Thank you,
being here.
everyone. It was a
Thank you,
great
Vishal.
party.
Everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.